Welcome to Mastering Legal English, the podcast. This is episode 12, Lawyered Up on Language, Phrasal Verbs Decoded. I'm Charlie Shan, an English coach for lawyers and an international entertainment consultant. And today we're diving into a topic that's very challenging for most non-native English-speaking lawyers, phrasal verbs. They're everywhere in English, but especially tricky for lawyers working in international practice. And I'm joined again by my trusty co-host, Steve Connor.
Hello, I'm Steve Kahana, a licensed attorney and the executive director of Juriscribe, a language services company that provides document translation services as well as legal English training. So let's dive into it. Some people might think that phrasal verbs are only used in casual conversation, but lawyers use them all the time in negotiations, in contracts, and even in court.
Great. And so let's define phrasal verbs. Steve, what's a phrasal verb?
And why do people care? I think that's important. Uh, so a phrasal verb is a verb plus a small word. It can be a preposition or an adverb that changes the meaning. So draw up is a phrasal verb, but it doesn't mean to pull something upwards. It doesn't mean to draw like a picture. In legal English, it means to prepare a document. You draw up a document.
Right. And the reason it matters is because phrasal verbs often sound less formal, but they're actually part of authentic legal communication. There's no real way around it. So if you only know the formal verbs or words like prepare, execute, or terminate, you can miss close to half of what's said in practice. Now, but Steve, you were talking about draw up. I think that's a good example when it comes to contracts and drafting.
Yeah, in the area of contracts and drafting, I use that example of draw up, and I think you may. What would you consider draw up for a non-native English speaker to mean for them?
For sure, the first thing they're going to think is draw is dibujar, like I'm going to draw a drawing, like maybe close to paint, a painting. And then up, certainly it must be like in the sky.
Right. But when the two terms are used together, they mean something completely different. When you draw up a contract in Spanish, that would be similar to redactar un contrato. Or when you draw up a plan, I think in Spanish you might say elaborar un plan. So draw up can mean redactar, it can mean elaborar, but it never means draw as in a painting.
Unfortunately. And similarly, spell out has a lot less to do with spelling, deletrear, than it would first seem. Because even if you know spell and out is deletrear fuera, spell out is a lot more like write out or explain. And this can come up when, let's say, there's a lack of clarity. And so it's a lot more, it's more annoying to get this third meaning of spell out. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I think in the context of a contract, if you need to spell out the terms, I think in Spanish that would be similar to saying something like precisar, concretar. But there are other contexts. Just in a generally a formal legal context, when you're spelling out a legal text, it may be similar to establecer expresamente in Spanish, or even in everyday legal discussions, if you're spelling out the terms of the deal, then it might be explicar claramente.
Right. And so you might come across this where if you're discussing something, you can say, look, we need to really spell this out in the contract. We need to make it really clear. And it's similar to set out. So let's say it's not very clear. You can say, no, it is. This was set out in the contract, which means it was stated clearly. And to set is kind of like to place or to put. And so you could also say it like spell out. We need to set this out. Like we need to spell this out if you want to use more than one.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then there's something else, which would be cross out.
So now we're getting to
Uh,
the negatives. Cross and out is a lot more like deleting or tachad. So now we're getting to like, look, we can't accept this. Cross that out of the contract. Put like literally, you might put a line through it, or in the days of computers, you hit delete. So that's cross out. What if I say I disagree? I think we need to sort this out. Would you even know what I'm saying, Steve?
I think I would know, but it is more of a British than an American phrasal verb to sort out or sort it out. Uh, I think most American lawyers, especially in international practice, would understand that term. Whether a non-native speaker would understand what to sort out means, I'm not sure. We need to sort this out before trial, for example. In the metaphorical sense, I think a Spanish speaker should know that that's the equivalent of something like tenemos que resolver esto antes del juicio. We need to sort this out before trial, or this clause needs to be sorted out because it's ambiguous. In Spanish, I don't know. What do you think they would say?
Oof. Clarify. We need to clarify this. I don't. You put me on the spot. Speak Spanish.
Sorry, sorry about that. I mean, it's something like "hay que aclarar esta cláusula es ambigua." I think that's actually a poor translation, but it gets the point across. Clarificar, clarify.
Now, if they won't sort this out, and now there's a lot of conflict, and so let's say it's between Steve and I, and he refuses to sort this out before trial, I could tell my client Steve won't back down. And it doesn't
Uh,
have much to do literally with his back, his espalda, going down, abajo on the ground. To back down is concede, stop, yield, withdraw. So if someone else won't back down, let's say in a legal setting, they're not withdrawing their lawsuit. They will see you in court because they won't back down.
Continuing to push, being aggressive, those are all synonyms for that.
Wonderful. And
In Spanish, I think it might be something like ceder, ceder la posición.
now you've been known to. There's a famous song about someone who won't back down.
Yes, and I would. Tom Petty has a song with that refrain, and they won't back down. But I will not try to mimic Tom Petty's singing of that phrase.
Yeah, and to keep this palatable, I suppose I won't either. A similar one is to give in. So I could say, Steve, you need to give in. You're not going to win this.
Yeah, we're not going to back down. You have to give in, basically.
And it doesn't
Yeah,
mean he's giving me anything, unless like surrender. He's giving me a surrender. So
or
give
give
in.
up, give
Yeah,
up as well. Just give up because we're not going to back down.
yeah, wonderful. And so that's another way of saying surrender. So give in, give up, back down. Differently though, like let's say you're you could be talking to your client and say the other side's going to bring up the fact that this was illegal. Bring up means to raise an issue. So in a way they're bringing something, and in a way it's up, but really they're going to make a point. And so you could bring up, let's say, a jurisdictional objection. And Steve, if you don't like someone, how could you use bring up to describe some bad behavior?
They're always bringing up the past. Stop bringing up the past. That's very
Yeah.
annoying.
So that's all. You might come across that as well. And that person could say in his defense, "Look, I'm just pointing out some of your flaws. Let's point out."
You're phrasal verbing me, and I really dislike that. But yes, pointing out is another phrasal verb, and you may want to point out the risks in the strategy, and that would mean to highlight or draw attention to. In Spanish, it might be señalar, indicar, or destacar might be another one.
A famous, like when you get to the meaning of the verb point, a famous saying in English is it's rude to point. So
Uh,
usually like a mother will tell children who are pointing at people like, hey, look at that person. So but point out is to highlight. So you could point out a flaw in their defense. Continue with out. We have carry out, which
carry
well,
out,
carry
yes.
out, which is not related to takeout, which you may know for getting takeout food or taking out the trash. An expert could carry out an inspection. What are the formal words that takes the place of?
I think execute or perform would be good synonyms for carry out. and in Spanish it might be implementar or llevar a cabo, to carry out the orders, to carry out the terms of the contract, would be the same as to perform or implement.
Yeah. Related, but not literally about carrying, where you're actually holding something. Now, I like the way that you described this to me earlier. Hand down, for example, the judge handed down his ruling. Where do you think this got? What is its meaning, and where do you think it came from?
I imagine that back in the day, the judges would actually hand down the written paper with their order or ruling on it, and that's where the phrase "hand down" came from. Or the royals and the kings handing down their edicts, I think, may also be one of the original sources for that phrase.
I'm old enough to have practiced law in a court before 2020 when everything so much went to Zoom, where I saw judges hand papers down to court representatives. And so I literally saw them hand down. Now it's a lot more just of a saying, depending where you're practicing law, if it's very virtual or not. But a similar kind of literal phrase or phrasal verb is throw out. And casually, you may know throw out as like put something in the garbage, but that's not the legal version, right?
No, no. So a court, may throw out a claim for lack of evidence, for example, and in that case, it would mean to dismiss or reject. It's informal. You wouldn't see it necessarily written in the decision itself, but that's how the lawyers would describe it. The claim was thrown out.
Yeah, and I mean, once again, not really directly involved in like actually throwing something, let's say, across the room. Similarly, we have
Well,
strikeout.
I've thrown things across the room several times, but that's probably not appropriate. So we won't discuss that.
And I've struck out if we're going to go to strike out, but that was playing baseball, and that was before I was a lawyer. And so to strike out, usually that's like let's say a part of a pleading or a part of a document. So what? How would you say? What's the formal way of saying something is struck out?
Probably to formally dismiss or reject or delete. I think in Spanish it might be something like desestimar. If you're talking about a pleading or a complaint, you would say desestimar or rechazar la demanda. That would be to strike out, or even to strike down, possibly. So, strike down is more typically used with legislation or a court decision. So to strike down as opposed to strike out, you strike out a portion of something. Strike down, usually striking down an entire decision or a piece of legislation. I holding it invalid, reject. It might be anular in Spanish, or invalidar would be the equivalent of strike down.
Yeah, and to me, there's a bigger weight to strike down because to me, yeah, it has takes out like an entire, let's say, law or document. Where strike out, perhaps a lot can survive, and only a part was taken out, like one clause.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, would you say because corporate lawyers are very matter of fact that they wouldn't use phrasal verbs at all?
No, I think corporate lawyers use a lot of phrasal verbs. I was out with a client last night, and I was asking him, "So what? Do you know what a phrasal verb is?" And he said, "Of course. We use them all the time, even in Spain." And so this is very typical to use a phrasal verb in the corporate law setting. Something like a company takes over another company, or a partner is bought out, or a company is wound up during insolvency. It's very common.
And it would be news worldwide. Let's say if Tim Cook stepped down, but that doesn't mean he's just walking down the stairs all like so we'll go through all of these one at a time. So to take over, let's say someone takes over a company. Take normally you take something, like you can take a chocolate bar, but to take over is actually to take control. And in corporate law, it's taking everything in a way, right, Stu?
Yes, yes, you're acquiring control of a company, um, and I'm not sure of the exact Spanish equivalent. I mean, typically a takeover is an OPA, oferta pública de adquisición, a public takeover. Uh, but to take over in the typical sense, I'd have to think a little bit about the right Spanish equivalent.
Yeah, that's fine. But what about buy out? So you could say the partner was bought out by the majority shareholder. To me, it's dramatic, but it's not like you're buying something, but you're not buying something at the store, right?
Yeah,
This is to do with shares and ownership and corporate law. So how would you agree with that? Buyout is actually a formal legal procedure. It's not
yeah,
just.
it's purchasing another party's interest or shares in a company. Typically, is to be bought out.
And then this one actually has two meanings. Like, you can say Steve's really winds me up. He really annoys me. Because
Yeah,
literally to wind is to like circularly like apply pressure. But in corporate law, wind up actually is a bit, it's more sad than that, isn't it?
yeah, it's closer to liquidation. The final steps of closing down a company, usually after insolvency proceedings. For example, the company is wound up or shut down.
Closed down. So you got like a lot of phrasal verbs there for like the sad death of a company.
Yes.
Similarly, so we had talked about step down. So, like, say the CEO stepped down after the scandal. It has to do with quitting and resigning, and not like something kind of temporary, like going downstairs. But less dramatic than step down is walked out.
You've done that to me a bunch of times. You've just walked out during our sessions sometimes. And,
I would say actually, millennials and Gen Z might say ghost,
ah,
but not ghost isn't a phrasal verb. It's more of just a verb and a metaphor. So the walkout is to, like, let's say you've really upset someone in your meeting and they walk out. They literally actually walk out. They leave a meeting abruptly. Otherwise, they would just leave and it wouldn't be a phrasal verb. This is a way to show that like they were upset and without saying politely goodbye. Okay, but what about everyday legal English? If I'm going to look into something, is that like a telescope?
uh, I don't think so. I don't think so. As usual, Charlie has his own interesting takes on language like this.
So right,
Uh,
you can say, look, like we need to look into that clause. Can you follow up with the opposing counsel? These are the phrases you'll hear. So look into you can like look. We need to look into whether that clause is enforceable. So that's really explore or research. And in Spanish, what would you say that is?
probably something like investigar, to look into it. Vamos a investigar este tema.
And if you were to follow up with the opposing counsel, does that mean you're just going to follow them down the street?
It might, in my case, but depending on how interesting or not they were, I've been known to follow clients down the street, yelling at them. But
I was told actually to put in your calendar follow up and in short FU with this client. And so follow up is to basically go and visit them again or call them again or email them to see if there's any updates. So follow up is used in everyday for sure. If you're talking to a client and there's a lot of paperwork, you could also say we need to fill out a lot of forms. Um,
rellenar, el formulario, absolutely. Fill out means to complete, or fill in. Also, it's very similar, filling out or filling in, and basically means to rellenar a document or a form.
you can metaphorically think like, yeah, you're filling the form in with ink and answers, but fill in or fill out for sure. Um, and workout is another one where you've got a dual meaning. So workout normally in personal life is to go to the gym and exercise. But if let's Steve and I are a counsel, opposing counsel, and we work out a settlement, that is not the same. That is, we've worked together to agree upon, or to resolve, or to find a way to complete the conflict. So a lot of these phrasal verbs, like they sound less formal than, let's say, like the more Latin formal ones, but they're used so much, especially in corporate law, that it's worth making sure you have a grasp of all of them. I wouldn't say they're optional, basically, and a lot of students of English know what phrasal verbs are, but the everyday person might not. So, would you agree, Steve? Are they optional?
No, I think they're not optional. I think if you want to understand real lawyers and meetings on deals and hearings, you really have to master the phrasal verbs.
Wonderful. Okay, so today we've seen that phrasal verbs are not just casual English, they're part of the DNA of legal practice. And I think you want to say, like, if you don't want to sound like a textbook, you need to use them, right?
Yeah, and try working them into your own legal English instead of relying on the formal term. Start thinking about what phrasal verbs can be used instead.
Great. Now, this is a bit of a, Steve, you were right. This is a bit of a shorter episode than normal. I thought it would take a bit longer to go through each phrasal verb, but you were right. But so that's what we have for you today. Before we finish, though, I just want to, of course, sponsored content. I want to say thank you to our sponsors. So I'm Charlie Shan, and I coach lawyers to practice law and English professionally. So if you're looking to get this part of your life handled, you can let me know. And Steve, you're not just here by yourself.
Well, I'm here, as you can see, representing Juriscribe, which provides translations of sophisticated corporate legal and financial documentation to clients on both sides of the Atlantic, and now is also providing legal English training for law firms, in-house counsel, and even bar associations.
Very exciting. All right. Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you for listening. For to Mastering Legal English. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.